Guys, silver is around $27.50 or about 15% off of its highs from around 32.40, while gold is still very close to its highs. I was wondering if we have seen the top for silver or does it still have more room to run? Now, gold has the added demand of central banks buying recently, as well as retail Chinese investors who are buying gold because the housing and stock market in China have been doing bad. Does silver have this same kind of new investment interest from Chinese and also Indian investors? Is silver big as a personal investment in India and China like it is here in the US? That's what I wanted to find out. So I will look at the apples to apples comparison of silver investment demand from these countries and others adjusted for population and income. And the results are very surprising, at least they were to me. I'm also going to give a broad overview of the supply and demand in silver and see what are the big changes and what is driving them. Also, I will look at the actual silver costs of producing silver to see if silver is cheap or expensive to produce compared to the current price. So let's get into it. So most of this data comes from the silverinstitute.org, the World Silver Survey 2024. So we're looking at the silver supply and demand from 2015 to 2024 full year. This 2024 number is obviously estimated based on where we are already in the year. So just understanding this in really broad strokes, mine production is like 800 million ounces. Recycling is like 180 million ounces for a total of 1 billion ounces a year. And you see from 2015 till now, the supply has not really changed much. Right? It dipped as low as 957 and as high as 1047. That's like a 5% swing. So let's just say every year it's basically a billion ounces. And so these are all the categories of the demand. Let's see which ones are the ones that are actually changing or increasing at least. So industrial demand went from 457 to 710. Okay, that's a pretty big move. That's about 250 million ounces. So that is a pretty big increase. But you see, most of that increase is from photovoltaics, which is the silver used in solar panels. That went from about 60 million to about 232 million in 2024. So that's about 170 million ounce increase or about 17% of yearly production. Whereas other things like brazing alloys and solders are only like 50 and are still like 50. So that hasn't moved, so that doesn't matter. Other industrial from 133 to 173, that's up a little bit. What's that? 20% or so, 25%. Not a big increase. The biggest increase is the solar panels, right? Photography is always decreasing. So it was 38, now it's 26. Also kind of irrelevant and decreasing. And jewelry pretty much stays the same from 200 in 2015. It's still 211, jumps around 234, 150 even. And I didn't even know this was still a category, but silverware, 58 million, and it's still like 58 million. And it jumps around a little bit, but not much. So nothing really to worry about. Now, net physical investment was 309 million and went as low as 155 million to 212 million, which is down from 337 just a few years ago. And net investment in ETPs, meaning exchange traded products like ETFs, the gold and silver ETFs, that kind of thing. It jumps around a little bit, but in the last few years, it's actually been losing silver. People are not buying them as much, although it did have a jump of 50 in 2023, but in 2024, it's going to be down 67%. So this is kind of a wild card, but it's still investment of personal investors, meaning either you're buying silver coins, silver bullion, or maybe you're buying the SLV ETF. So really the only two categories you need to worry about in silver demand is photovoltaics and physical investment. And so the real question to me is, just like China has been picking up the slack in gold demand from personal investors, retailers, because the housing and stock market is not doing well, they've been buying more gold for their own personal investment. Are they buying silver? And do Indians do the same thing? Are they switching from gold to silver, or just buying more silver as an investment because maybe housing and the stock market is not doing well over there? That's what I really wanted to find out, meaning, is that the potential for the demand for investment demand to increase a lot because of China and India? And so here's a chart of global supply. You see it's around 1 trillion ounces. Most of it is mining, with about 17% in dark green being the recycling of it. And the source of most recycling is mostly industrial here in gray, jewelry in green, and photos in yellow. The smallest one is coins, this little burgundy up here. So very little coins are actually being recycled. It's mostly industrial photos and silverware, actually. And so looking at a chart of global demand, you see that the demand in industrial is the most, and it's increasing, whereas jewelry in green is pretty much staying the same, and investment is a pretty big portion, although it kind of fluctuates a little, smaller here, bigger here. But the other things like photography and silverware are very tiny and kind of just stays the same or decreases. And so this is supply demand swings by sector. You see industrial swings a lot, and so does investment, where the other ones are pretty much the same or are declining. So in this mine production forecast, you see the blue is North America, green Central and South America, and the orange is Asia, and the rest is very small. So industrial fabrication forecast in blue is East Asia, and that's the only one that's really increasing because they're the ones that are making all these solar panels that are using up this silver. And here's a chart of the cumulative silver ETP holdings of the different ETFs and whatnot. And it was as high as like 1.2 trillion. Now it's more like around 900 million. And the physical investment forecast for 2024, bars and coins, surprisingly, they're about equal. 100 million each is 212 for 2024, which is 13% lower than 2023. Now, here's a real kick in the teeth for silver demand. That is Germany. You see they were buying about 50 million ounces, and now they're only buying like 13 million ounces because of a change in the VAT for silver. So while Germany had a share of over 70% of the European region, they posted a 73% drop. So they say over 2014 to 2022, non-EU silver coins were subject to 7% VAT on the full value of the coin, plus 19% VAT on dealer margins, whereas other non-EU silver had a full 19% VAT on the full product value. But this favorable treatment was abruptly removed at the start of 2023, so coin sales effectively collapsed following the change. So that's a big decrease in investment demand from Germany, which was a big buyer. Now, US physical investment demand for bars and coins, they had a low in 2019 of just about 20 million each or so, and 2022, 2023 were as high as, say, 60 million for coins and another 50 million for bars or something along those lines. So US retail investors are pretty big buyers of silver bars and coins. And now you look at Indian physical investment, and you see bars and coins together are about 40 million ounces in 2023 and maybe above 50 in 2022, which is a pretty good number, except when you consider how many people live in India and their yearly income. So here is the retail physical investors in different countries from 2014 to 2023. You see the US was like 111 million, and now in 2023 was still only like 118 million, and fell as low as like 47 million in 2018. The next biggest is India, who bought as much as 100 million ounces in 2014, but that has been decreasing to the point of 8.7 million in 2020 and now about 50 million in 2023. Whereas Germany, which was a pretty big buyer, and they were more recently in 2021, 2022, now they've dropped down to 13 million from 48 million and 50 million. That's a huge drop. In 2023, Australia bought like 12 million, Canada like 8 million, China like 7.8 million. So Canada and China buy the same amount of silver per year, and Australia buys more than both of them. So here's where I answer the question of, do Indians and Chinese really consider silver as an investment for their personal investment stash? And so I took the biggest investors in silver, and I took their population and their average income, meaning the GDP of the country divided by the population. And so I look at, on average, how many ounces per person in that country, total out of the total population, did they buy, how much did they spend, and what percentage of their yearly income are they budgeting to buy these silver investments. And then I compare it to gold. So to start off, let's take a quick look at the US. Let's say it's 118 million ounces that were bought in 2023 of investment silver, meaning coins and bars. That's what all these numbers are. Okay, population 336 million. So let's just say 100 million in silver on a population of 300 million. That's about a third of an ounce each, right? So just roughly speaking, this is the number, 0.35. So 118 divided by 336 is 0.35. Assuming a price of about $25 an ounce in 2023. So 0.35 times $25 an ounce, meaning the average person in the US bought 0.35 of an ounce in 2023. Now, obviously, not everybody bought silver at all. Some people bought hundreds of ounces. Some people bought none. Some people bought 10. But the average is this, meaning that they spent $8.79 per person in the whole US for the silver that they bought as an investment in 2023. And that is 0.011% or 100th of 1% of their yearly income, right? And the green numbers are the highest in the category and the red is the lowest in the category. Okay, so even though the US bought the most silver and China bought the least, China has the largest population and India's is second, and the US has the largest income, whereas India has the lowest. So if you take the amount of silver bought divided by the population, you come out that Australia actually bought the most silver per person in the country, 0.45 ounces per person, but they only have 27 million people. Whereas China bought the least amount of silver per person, 0.01 or 1/100th of an ounce of silver. And they only spent 14 cents per person on silver in the whole country of China. Whereas Australians spent $11.30 per person to invest in silver. And Indians only spent 88 cents per person to invest in silver, whereas the US spent $8.79. And so percentage-wise of their yearly income, Indians actually spent the most of their yearly income, 0.035%, to invest in silver. The Chinese spent the least, 1,000th of 1%, or 14 cents per person, to invest in silver. So just looking at the dollars per person spent, Australia's number one, US number two, Canada number three, Germany number four, even at these reduced levels. But just looking at ounces bought, US bought the most, India second, Germany third, even at the reduced levels, then Australia, then Canada, and last China. So now if you look at how much they spent and what percentage of the money they spent of their yearly income they spent on gold, that's a different story. So looking at how many metric tons of gold each country bought for investment by retail investors, It's 113 metric tons for the US. The most is China, 280, and the least is Australia, with India 185. And so in ounces, that's almost 4 million for the US, 6.5 million for India, and almost 10 million ounces for China. So the country that bought the most ounces per person is actually Germany, with 200th of an ounce per person bought in 2023. Next is Australia, then the US, then China, and then India. Or dollars per person wise, Germany spent almost $38, whereas India spent the least, $9 per person. But again, they have a lot of people, so that's still a lot of gold. And US spent $23 per person, Australia 35.5. I could not find the numbers for Canada, so it's probably similar to Germany and Australia's numbers. And China spent $13.6 per person. And percentage of their yearly income, Indians spent 0.36% of their yearly income on gold. So that is the highest percentage of their income out of all the countries was spent on gold, even though they only make 25.40. Next was China at 0.1%, and then Germany at 0.07, Australia 0.06, and the US at 0.03. So to get the true picture of how much investors in these countries like gold more than silver, just look at how much they spend on gold and divide it by how much they spent on silver. And that tells you how much more they like gold than they like silver. So for instance, in the US, they spent $23 per person on gold versus $8.79 on silver. That comes out to a ratio of 262. So for every dollar they spent on silver, they spent 262 on gold. Whereas China, for every $1 they spent on silver, they spent $98 on gold. So they like gold almost 100 times more than they like silver. India likes silver a little bit more, not as much as the US. So for every dollar they spend on investment silver, they spend like $10 on gold. And Germany is almost the same as India. They buy gold at a rate of about 10 to 1 compared to silver. And Australians like silver a lot, almost as much as Americans. So for every dollar in silver they buy, they only buy $3 in gold. So guys, what does this tell you about Chinese and Indians' love for silver? They don't love it that much as an investment compared to gold. And so even though the Chinese retail investors stepped up and started buying a lot more gold because housing and the stock market is doing well, it does not look to me like they're going to be heavily switching to silver as an investment, or the Indians either, even though the Indians like silver 10 times better than the Chinese, but they still don't like it as much as Americans or Australians or even Germans, who are now discouraged from buying silver because of that 19% VAT. So the Chinese and the Indians are not going to step up and start buying a lot more silver than they do gold. And we're actually at a deficit because of the reduction in Germany's investment in silver because of that VAT issue. So Germany may not recover. They may stay at that 13 million ounce level instead of the 50 million or so that they were at. So we are at a deficit of 35 million ounces or whatever that we need to catch up just to stay where we were in the last few years, it seems. So the takeaway here is really the only increase in silver investment demand is going to be from Americans, meaning any significant demand is going to come from Americans. It's not coming from Germany because of the VAT. And Indians and Chinese don't care enough about silver. They much prefer to spend their money or invest their money on gold. So now, is the price of silver actually cheap compared to what it costs to dig it out of the ground? Let's go take a look at that and see where silver actually comes from. It's not all from silver mines. So let's go have a look. So the majority of silver producing countries are in the Americas. Number one is Mexico, then China, Peru, Chile, Bolivia, Poland, Russia, Australia, United States. So the majority of silver actually comes as a byproduct from mining other materials. And so only 235 million ounces of silver in 2023 actually came from a primary silver mine. The rest comes from mining lead and zinc, copper, gold, and other. And so you see, primary silver is only 28.3%, whereas copper is 26, gold 13, and lead and zinc 30. So about a quarter of the silver comes from them mining copper, and it's a byproduct. Now, if we're going to be mining a lot more copper to make these new utilities to fund these AI data centers and all this stuff, there's going to be a lot more silver byproduct from the extra copper that they're making. So that is a possible increase in supply of silver coming down the pike. And looking at global mine production, you see the dark blue is North America, green is Central and South America, and orange is Asia. And that's the majority of the production, really, is these three areas. And this is the global byproduct production of silver. You see the silver produced as a byproduct of copper has been increasing since 2014. Zinc is pretty flat or decreasing a little. Lead is pretty flat or decreasing a little. Gold is actually going up. So what does it cost to produce an ounce of silver? There is the total cash cost per ounce, but there's the all-in sustaining cost, meaning all the overhead and workers and machinery and all of that stuff involved. So going by the all-in sustaining cost, North America is $19.44, up 25% from 2022. Central America, $14.55, CIS, $17.05, Asia, only $8.91, and Oceania, like $9.81. So Asia is the low-cost producer, and they make a lot in China, whereas North and Central and South America, where they also make a lot, has a lot higher costs. So the average is like $17 an ounce. So guys, with the cost of mining silver around $17 an ounce, it's unlikely that silver is going to jump up to $40 or $50 or even $200 like some people say. If the price of silver got up to, say, $40 or $50, where miners are making 3 times the cost of what it cost them to dig it out, they're going to either mine a lot more of it, or some other mines are going to start coming online that weren't profitable when silver is $25, $30 an ounce. Maybe they're hugely profitable when it's $40 or $50 an ounce, let alone $200 an ounce. So that's kind of what's holding the silver price down, is the actual cost of production. Now, if the cost of production goes up because of inflation in wages or energy or machinery or something like that, then realistically, the price of silver could tick up more as the price of actually producing it increases. Now, a lot of people that are trying to sell you silver or get you hyped up about it say things like, oh, guess what? You know, there's 500 ounces of silver that go into a Tomahawk missile, and we're going to be fighting Russia soon. And so do the math, and, you know, it's going to be a whole lot of silver out there that we're going to have demand for. And so that's going to increase the price to $200 or something like that. Let me tell you, that is complete BS. And I will show you right now. So here's an article saying, why is the U.S. Navy running out of Tomahawk cruise missiles? So the U.S. Navy bought all of 55 Tomahawk missiles last year and already fired 68% of them at the Houthis in one day. This is good for the price of silver, right? Well, not really, because they don't make many of these missiles per year. So in the last 10 years, $2.8 billion was spent on these Tomahawk missiles to procure just 1,234 missiles. So number one, even if it was 500 ounces per missile, which is nonsense, that would only be 500 times 1,234 missiles. That's 600,000 ounces, not even 1 million ounce. That's a drop in a bucket to the billion ounces that is mined every year. So we make less than 100 of these missiles a year, and it's definitely not 500 ounces of silver per missile. I've seen other things that say it's more like maybe 15 to 30 ounces, and that's probably a lot. It's more for some soldering and wiring and for some parts of a battery, which it's not all silver, the battery, obviously. So it is little pieces of it. It's not, they're not dropping a monster box of eagles on somebody every time they hit them with a tomahawk. So if somebody's trying to tell you that the silver price is going to skyrocket because of the amount of silver goes into a Tomahawk missile, completely discount what they're telling you and probably anything else they tell you about silver or gold. And just for comparison, in 2003, the Iraq invasion, the US used 800 Tomahawk missiles, which even if it was 500 ounces per missile, that would only be 4 million ounces. Again, a drop in the bucket in demand. So I'm not that optimistic that silver is going to have a big run up, even comparable to gold. And before you call me a Fed shill or something like that, I have been holding silver for probably more than 15 years now. And inflation adjusted, it is a losing investment over that period of time, and even compared to gold or especially the stock market. So if you think the Chinese and Indians will start to replace gold with silver in their investments, I don't think it will happen much or at all. Maybe demand for solar panels could drive demand a little, but I don't think it is moving the needle that much just yet. And with Germany buying a lot less silver, Americans need to pick up the slack just to stay at the same demand level as before. Also, with a lot more electric power needed for the AI data center buildouts that everybody is talking about, that may mean more copper production, which means more silver byproduct from the copper mining. So the only positive for silver might be the Fed lowering interest rates, which makes gold and silver more attractive, or some kind of financial panic. Either way, I've held silver for a long time, so what's another few years? Let me know in the comments if you agree that big gains in the silver price is unlikely, or if I missed something in my analysis. Also, do not tell me that it is suppressed and it's going to jump up to 200 any day now, because if that was the case, wouldn't China, India, Russia, or some other country be loading up on it at these artificially low prices all these years? And why is gold not suppressed to the same extent, since it is even more important as a monetary metal to central banks? So guys, just look at the numbers and make your own objective analysis without listening to the hype of people trying to sell you something. I hope you like this one. I'll see you in the next one, guys. Thanks for watching.